Hello and welcome to the Australian Bitcoin podcast, brought to you by Hardblock, Australia's longest running Bitcoin exchange. My name is Alex, and today I'm joined by the Wizard of Oz.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for the invitation, man. It's a joy to speak to you again, see you again.
Now, for those who don't know Wiz, which I think is probably pretty unlikely, but Wiz is another prolific Australian Bitcoiner, one of our very wise leaders in the Australian Bitcoin community. He opened this year's Bitcoin Alive conference and is a key organizer behind both Bitcoin Brisbane and the Bitcoin Bush Bash. And for those that haven't heard me, I've been saying it over and over, but the Bitcoin Bush Bash is on again at the end of this month up in Cairns, 27th to 28th of July. So Wiz, you got a background in software development, experience in complex projects, lots of interacting parts, dealing with risk, unknown unknowns, but had a bit of a change in life. What's been happening recently?
Yeah, lots of stuff, Alex. Yeah, thanks. I don't know about wise. Definitely feeling old. 40 years working on big complex systems, but interestingly, all closed source. And so for banks, insurance companies, freight, logistics, airlines, government, large complex stuff, mainframes, COBOL, for anybody who's ever heard of that. Yeah,
what's COBOL? You can't just throw that out. What is COBOL?
Common business oriented language, invented by Admiral Grace Hopper from the US Navy in the late 50s, I think, or early 60s.
So you're actually a greybeard.
If I grew one, it'd be a white beard.
Yeah.
So the majority of the world's financial transactions, about 85% of them, still flow through mainframe systems, and the majority of the software on those mainframe systems are all written in COBOL. And increasingly, people of my vintage are all retiring, as I did last year, and they're not training as many COBOL developers as they should to maintain those systems. So they're increasingly finding themselves in tricky positions. Yeah, so I kind of finished my fiat career, if you like, and like Jeff Booth says, time to put your life energy into working on the new system rather than propping up the old one, which I was literally doing in some places. Been involved in Bitcoin Brisbane and the Bush Bash for 4 or 5 years now. Great fun. Always good talking about Bitcoin. Always helpful to remind yourself that there's always new people coming in, and they've always got the same questions that we each had, and help them understand them and give them a frame of reference to understand. The other major thing I've done this year is join OpenSats. So OpenSats is a charitable foundation out of the US, 501c, which means that your deductions in the US are tax deductible, along with the Human Rights Foundation and with Brink, who are two other 501c corporations. They all support open source and open source development and Bitcoin in some way, shape or form. So I'm down the bottom of the pecking order in OpenSat. So at the top of the pecking order is the board, who are 9 very knowledgeable Bitcoin people who have got the unenviable, unpaid and thankless job of sifting through the hundreds and hundreds of grant applications from open source developers all across the ecosystem in Bitcoin and Nostr, and selecting the ones that are going to have the most impact, and then repeating the process month after month after month. That's hard yards. Then there's the mechanical piece, which is the distribution of funds and compliance with US regulations with regards to money and donations and accounting and all that sort of stuff. That's the operations team. They actually get paid because they do real work, not that the fortnight don't do real work. And then down the bottom of the totem pole are the pleb shit kickers, which is where I live, and there's a group of us that try and help out as and when requested, and get various things handed off to us, and basically just try and put our shoulders to the wheel as best we can to help the people on the board or people in the ops team just pick up the pace of things in OpenSats. There are people you'll see on Twitter and Nostr who will have a bit of a complaint about how quickly things are moving or not, all I can say is that there's a gigantic workload and people are working really hard to accelerate things. So it's been a really great pleasure to help there, and it feels very mission aligned.
Yeah, it's certainly impressive. OpenSats, Brink, HRF, there's a handful of these organizations now doing a really important mission. Wiz, what would you say is the purpose of OpenSats? Like, why wouldn't someone just donate directly to developers, or what role does OpenSats play?
So probably three important things. The first is that it insulates the donors from the grantees. The second is that there's a pretty deep, broad knowledge of Bitcoin within and across the board. So they do their very best to identify the most impactful things that will help Nostr or Bitcoin, because we have two separate funds. And thirdly is it insulates the developers from any insinuations of bias or leverage, untoward leverage. For example, OpenSats gave a grant to Josie Baker last year, I think August 23. Josie's been working with Ruben Thompson and others on silent payments. So if you look perhaps over the last 3 to 6 months in some jurisdictions across the globe, there's been a lot of heat and regulatory pressure around financial privacy adversely. And so the people who've donated to OpenSats don't have a say in where that money goes, apart from it goes into the Nostr fund or it goes into the Bitcoin fund. It insulates both sides, so it's a very important role.
Yeah, that's cool. I know Jersey actually from the Chain Lab seminars. He's one of the, I guess, I don't know, facilitators or instructors. Yeah, it's really good. All these developers also help out in the community in other ways as well, with education and other roles too, which is always great.
Pay it forward.
Yeah. All right, well, on to some news. So this is a news episode, and today we're going to actually cover or do a bit of a focus on the Lightning Network. So Wiz actually gave me my first education in Lightning. I don't know if you actually know that, but yeah, I sort of delve into the Lightning Network, saw a lot of the tools through attending the Brisbane meetup a handful of times a couple of years ago. So I thought I'd bring on my Lightning guy and we'd cover some Lightning news.
Excellent.
So we're going to, excellent. Yeah. So we're going to start with a bit of the state of the Lightning Network. And I've got some stats from Mempool.space. So the current capacity, this is the public capacity of Lightning, is around 5,205 Bitcoin. We've got 13,233 public nodes and over 50,000 publicly announced Lightning channels. Some of the biggest nodes include some of our shitcoin exchanges like OKX and Binance, who have 640 and 580 Bitcoin roughly in their channels, followed by Async at 557 Bitcoin. In terms of network connectivity, Async is first with 2,626 channels. And notably, Wallet of Satoshi, who's one of our Australian legends, they're down in third with 1,556 Lightning channels. So it's a pretty crazy number of Lightning channels, very well connected on the network.
Exceptionally connected. Yeah, huge shout out to the team at Wallet of Satoshi. Yeah, they do get a bit of stick for being custodial, but I think it's like you've got to understand the trade-offs. One of their big ups, though, is very high uptime. I've never seen it down. Have I never seen a payment fail? No, I've probably seen payments fail. Very, very occasionally, though. And they were very early. I did beta testing for them back in 2019, I think. But they're also KYC free. So you do not need to dox your identity to use Wallet of Satoshi. And that's a very important and valued.
Yeah. I think Wallet of Satoshi would be the Lightning wallet of choice for most people for onboarding people to Bitcoin. It's like for your first touch point with Bitcoin, just seeing things work, instantly, no problems, super clean UX. It's exactly what we want. And so, you're right, they're custodial, but it's like a tool for the job.
I'm a big fan of Phoenix for the same reason. Very lovely UX, easy to use, simple, reliable, and the async node, which sits behind Phoenix, extremely good, extremely well connected. The only thing to remember about the stats for the Lightning Network, like the 5,200 Bitcoin, is that's the capacity of the public channels. So it doesn't count the 4,700 Bitcoin that you and I have in our private channel, Alex. The private channels that sit between probably major exchanges. We know, for example, that Strike is a massive user of Lightning. We know the Chivo wallet in El Salvador, also a big user of Lightning. They will have some number of public channels, but they will have significant private channels for liquidity and also for other purposes. So those are in addition. So what we can see publicly is a fraction of what exists. It frustrates me as an engineer that I can't see all the data, but as a Bitcoiner, the fact that I can't see the data, I have to acknowledge is a feature, not a bug.
Yeah. Before we maybe jump into anything more complex, maybe we'll start with a bit of like some beginner explainer. What is the Lightning Network?
Yeah, so I guess I've come around to Pete Wynn's definition of the Lightning Network, which is the Lightning Network is Bitcoin's fast settlement layer. And when it was first launched in 2018, really, it was all about peer-to-peer payments. And you can absolutely use it for that. And things like Phoenix and Wallet Satoshi and peer-to-peer, we're probably not talking Wallet Satoshi, and running your own Lightning nodes, and you've probably seen me give presentations on that.
Yeah.
But as Lightning's matured and then other services, applications, and layers have come along, all of them are using Lightning as a settlement layer. And I think this kind of matches with what I've come to realize about running a Lightning node is if you want to run a Lightning node because you want the privacy and sovereignty that gives you, then you really need to think very carefully about what you're going to use it for. If we're going to run the Alex node and Alex just wants to set up a couple of big fat channels for future payments on some gear that is well maintained and connected to maybe one very well connected node and maybe...
Would that be your node, Wiz? Yep. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
My old Wizard of Oz node is no longer, unfortunately. But you might have 2 or 3 channels to people you know who run well-operated nodes, Lightning nodes, and you might have 1 or 2 connections into a very well-connected node. And so you're not looking to route payments. You're just looking to be able to plug into the Lightning Network, make payments, and receive payments as and when you need. That's very different to, I want to run a routing node and perhaps I'm going to make some money out of the routing node. So let me disabuse you of that. Running a routing node requires a lot of liquidity and a lot of management. What's the Lightning Network and what are the components? You've got nodes, you've got channels, and you've got sats. So a Lightning node sits on top of a Bitcoin node. So it's an extra piece of software that talks to the Bitcoin node. And Lightning nodes connect to other Lightning nodes. And the way they connect to other Lightning nodes is through a channel. A channel requires an on-chain transaction to set up, and it can be thought of as an abacus. So I create a channel from my node, my Lightning node to your Lightning node, Alex, and we've now got an abacus between us. If I've set it up, and let's say I've set it up with 1 million sats of liquidity, then the 1 million sats is all sitting on, those 1 million beads of that abacus are all sitting on my side of the channel. You may also open up a channel to me, and you may open up 1 million sats as well, and so you've got 1 million sats sitting on your side. So if I want to pay you, so I need to pay you 5,000 sats for a beer last night, then I can pay you that, and the effect of that will send the 5,000 sats from my node to your node down the channel that I opened because I have sats in that channel. And you could pay me for the steak dinner, you're going to pay me 30,000 sats. Now we have channels with sats on each side, and so you can send those sats backwards and forwards, making payments, receiving payments for as long as that channel is open. So that could be, I had channels on Wizard of Oz that were open a couple of years, and I will start another Lightning node again, but it'll be on more resilient hardware, and it'll be with the purpose of having a small number of channels that I expect to keep open for years and years. And one of the big differences between Lightning and on-chain is there is no record of the payments that you're making on the Lightning Network. So it's considerably more private.
Yeah, quicker as well. I think the way to think about the Lightning Network is, like you said, as a settlement network, is that it's a way of almost opening a bar tab or something like that, where you can consolidate a large number of transactions into on-chain transactions. So you open a channel, you can conduct as many back and forth transactions within that channel, and then at some point, if you decide to, you can close that channel and settle up. And so that's where the massive efficiencies of Lightning really come in.
Yeah, I think the important thing to emphasize when you use that analogy about a bar tab is that bar tab can remain open for years and years and years. And people say, well, what about when you've spent all the million sats with that you opened to Alex? Well, maybe Alex and I are doing some business together. Maybe I do some things for Alex and he pays me. Maybe Alex does things for me and I pay him. They go backwards and forwards. Or maybe I just keep paying Alex until I've run out. And then maybe I'm going to go and buy some more sats on an exchange that supports Lightning. And so instead of withdrawing on chain, I'm going to withdraw on Lightning and I'm going to withdraw into my node. And all of a sudden, those million sats route back through Alex's node and a million sats end up back on my side of the channel, all ready to spend again. Happy days.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And then for the routing component is thinking like those abacuses all connected. So you and I might have a channel, and then Wiz might have a channel with someone else, and then the person might have a channel with someone else. And so rather than just opening a channel and only being able to make payments to Wiz or Wiz pay me, I can actually pay, a third or fourth party via Wiz.
So in the Lightning Network, because there's a cost to liquidity, so if I open up 1 million sats to you, Alex, that's basically 1,000 Australian dollars worth of liquidity I've now got tied up in that channel. So I want to get some return on that. I'm happy to route the payments, and I'm going to clip the ticket a little bit along the way because that goes towards the cost of maintaining a good routing node, keeping up and operational, and those are some of the things that affect your ranking in the Lightning Network. For those of us who've been using Lightning for quite a while, in the early days, I guess like the early days of Bitcoin Layer 1, there were little or no transaction fees. And it's very easy to get sucked into that mentality that, it was free, therefore it should always be free. And I must admit, I had a little unload and a rant this morning on Nostra about this generally, is that you should expect to pay for Bitcoin products and services. And that includes transaction fees on Layer 1 and transaction fees for Lightning. No difference. There's a subtle fiat effect, primarily driven from things like Facebook, Google, Twitter, LinkedIn, G Drive, all of those, free data storage. People are used to being able to search for free, being able to store their photos for free, being able to connect with their family all over the world for free, being able to set up video calls and video conferences for free. And what they're trading off is they are the product. All of those aspects are monetized, sold multiple times in multiple ways. We'll ignore the whole surveillance aspect. But yeah, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. In Bitcoin, you should expect to pay for the things that you use. And the most obvious is you're going to pay for Bitcoin transactions. Everything's new. Everyone's trying lots of different business models, different business ideas, innovating at a great rate. And where things work, lots of imitators quickly pop up. yeah, me too. I can do that. And that's the free market at work, and that's fantastic. And that'll drive down price. We like that.
Yeah. I have to think in terms of the cost of capital in Lightning. What's directly related to the interest rate. So what else, or the opportunity cost for what you could be doing with that capital otherwise. So if you could use those funds elsewhere, that's going to affect how much people are willing to lock up. But also security as well. The more secure Lightning becomes, the less risky it's perceived to offer liquidity on Lightning. So I think as Lightning improves, we'll see that less reluctance with providing liquidity.
Yeah, and interestingly, OpenSats just recently announced a grant to, I think, the Validating Lightning Signer project is looking at using HSMs to
What's a HSM?
Yeah, 3D module. So a little bit analogous to the secure enclave if you've got an iPhone. So it's a secure chip that allows the storage of encrypted information that can't be extracted except through an authorized manner. So that should give the ability to give more security into large Lightning operators. Because you think back to some of those examples you quoted, OKX and Binance, $64 million and $58 million worth of Bitcoin tied up in Lightning channels. Not trivial.
Yeah. Some big nodes. And for those that are unaware, because of the design of Lightning, the node is actually required to be a hot wallet in a sense. So it's the node requires access to the keys to be able to sign and route transactions. And so because of that, something like validating a Lightning signer is an attempt to make a more secure environment to hold those keys, because it's simply not possible to simultaneously be on Lightning and hold those keys in cold storage.
Correct. Yep. And that's the key thing. A key thing about Lightning generally is the Lightning nodes have to be online to work. Yeah. And if you're running a Lightning node and your Lightning node is not online, then you can't send or receive, and so payments to or from your node will fail. Whereas if you're running a Bitcoin node and you have a Bitcoin address, that address will always work. It does not need to be online for your payment to succeed.
Yeah, and we'll come back to the importance of keeping a Bitcoin node online, and your Lightning node online shortly.
Yep.
Now, some more Australian news. So Wallet of Satoshi, who again is our Australian Lightning Wallet developer here, they have launched a point of sale app fairly recently, but more recently they've announced that they've done an integration with Square point of sale terminals, which you're probably familiar with. They're ubiquitous, they're everywhere. So now if you're a merchant receiving a Lightning payment via the Wallet of Satoshi point of sale app, you can set it up so it instantly appears as a payment in the Square terminal, which, as you can imagine, massively simplifies some of the difficulties that merchants face if they're thinking about accepting payments. If they've already got a Square terminal, which again is pretty much everywhere, then it automatically comes across, and it makes things like bookkeeping and keeping track of like what sales you've made and inventory much simpler. So yeah, it's quite cool to see. We'll put the link up if you want to did a little demo video. We'll put it up in the description if you want to have a look, and if you're interested as a merchant. But yeah, Wiz, like, how significant do you think something like this is? These little things, integrations into existing bookkeeping applications and making things easy for merchants. How big a deal is this?
Yeah, pretty huge. As we started July, a new Australian financial year, we've got the odious task of preparing accounts and all of the forms and data required for lodging tax returns. In a business, that's a significant piece of workload, and it detracts from what you're actually there to do, whether that's make milkshakes, bake bread, butcher meat, fix cars, cut hair, whatever you're doing for a living. The admin takes away from that or adds to the burden. Everything that simplifies that and makes it simpler and reduces the workload means that it's less stressful to run a business and easier to scale. You can do more work, and you're not having to do 40 or 50 hours working with customers and then another 20 hours trying to figure out, oh my God, how do I reconcile these Lightning payments? How do I put the individual Lightning payments into Xero? And and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a really big deal. The way they've done it, I think, is very smart, and yeah, kudos to to the team. It's impressive. I've probably not been unique in kind of waiting for Square to roll out Lightning payments natively, but given the jurisdiction that they originate from, that may be a long time coming. But in the meantime, in Australia, we're in a very fortunate position that there is a carve out for personal use of Bitcoin spending, which is not subject to capital gains tax. It encourages innovation like this, both for businesses like Wallet of Satoshi, but also for Bitcoiners who want to use Bitcoin in the wild and see how it works, and for merchants who want to start earning Bitcoin. And that's where we're going to end up. Probably more in your lifetime than mine, Alex, that there'll be a very small amount of Bitcoin left to mine. You'll either earn it directly, you'll work for Bitcoin, or you will have investments in Bitcoin companies that will generate a SAT yield. Whole different topic.
Yeah. Speaking of tax as well, for those that are interested in more information on tax, Dan actually spoke with Maria Kovalenko. So you can go check out that episode, and she actually really dove into what the implications are around that personal use asset exemption, if you're interested in that. It was quite surprising. I remember she mentioned that it's per occurrence. It's not like a per year thing, which was that was interesting to me.
Well worth a listen.
So, moving on to some other news, or at least I just wanted to get your review, really, because I know you're the Lightning guy, but you're also my Liquid guy, is AquaWallet. So AquaWallet is a Bitcoin wallet, a Lightning wallet, also Liquid, which we'll get into what that is, and Tether, which is a stable coin. Some would call a shitcoin, but it's a stable coin. And so AquaWallet is a new wallet. It's fast, non-custodial, that launched earlier this year. It's been about 6 months that it's been out in production now, and I've had to play with it. I know Wiz is a fan. So yeah, what do you think? How have you found using AquaWallet? What do you think of Liquid?
I like it. I've been using it for 6 months. I spent a day or so with another mate at the start of the year. I think it was the 3rd of January. Yeah, because the company that released it is Jan 3, Samsung company. Yeah. So they released Aqua on the 3rd of January. And so we spent 3rd of January, 4th of January playing it and bashing it, trying to break it and figuring where the rough edges were. And it was very early release. They've iterated rapidly since then. So yeah, as you said, non-custodial, mobile, Bitcoin Layer 1 wallet, and also a Liquid wallet. So Liquid is a sidechain, and it differs from Bitcoin in a couple of major ways. So instead of having miners, it has functionaries, 15 functionaries in different parts of the world, different geographies, for the purpose of making it difficult to shut down. So Liquid is basically a rip of Bitcoin. It's a fork of Bitcoin, but it has a couple of noticeable differences. One is that it uses functionaries to sign on a 1-minute block time. So they sign every 1 minute. So very consistent, deterministic, not probabilistic. And also that they are confidential transactions. So you can see a transaction if you go to Mempool, and in the top left of Mempool, there's a little drop down for BTC, and you can see underneath the testnet, and you can see
that's Mempool.space. That's the address link for anyone who's listening in.
And so you can look at a transaction, and you can go and look at some of the transactions in the Liquid network. But what you'll see is that there was a transaction, basically. But what you won't be able to see is what was transacted, nor will you be able to see how much was transacted. It's very private. So for those people that like privacy, exploring Liquid and how Liquid works is worthwhile, and Aqua makes it very easy to do that. So to get Bitcoin into the Liquid network, you peg it in, technically, and you need to peg it out to go back from Liquid into native Bitcoin. Now, the peg out is permissioned in the sense that the only people who can do it are functionaries. So theoretically, they could not sign the peg out transaction, which means that your Bitcoin on the Liquid network would be stuck in the Liquid network. Then on the Liquid network, you can run multiple things can travel on the Liquid network. So if you think about it as a set of rails, you can have passenger cars, you can have trains, you can have cargo. So examples of that would be Liquid Bitcoin, the obvious one, which is generally referred to as LBTC. Then you can have things like Tether, stablecoins. They can also travel on the Liquid network. And then you can have other things like investment products. So Blockstream released an investment product called the Bitcoin mining note, which is a genuine security. You have to be registered for it, blah, 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 blah. But that travels and trades on the Liquid network. So you can put all sorts of things on the Liquid network. And if you have a play with elements, you can actually create an Alex coin. And Alex coin would have, one coin that would be unique and therefore very valuable, at least to Alex. But it has the same qualities of Bitcoin in the sense that you can verify how many Alex coins are there. Oh, there's only one. Oh, Alex sold it to me. Oh, wow. That's great. And the 1 minute block times means that you can move things like USDT or Liquid Bitcoin or the Bitcoin mining notes around very easily and very quickly and very deterministically. What Aqua's done with Lightning is very clever. It's not actually a Lightning wallet in the sense that it has a Lightning node behind it. It uses bolts.exchange to do on-the-fly swaps between Liquid and Lightning, which is a very clever way to do it. And for those that remember back to earlier this year and various points last year when fees got astronomically high, there was a lot of pain and suffering on the Lightning network. We won't dive into that. But if you wanted to open new channels or you needed liquidity into Lightning, Liquid via bolts.exchange allowed you to do swaps between Liquid and Lightning. So you could quickly introduce new liquidity into the Lightning network without having to do on-chain transactions. Very, very useful tool.
Would you call Liquid a layer 2? How do you view that Liquid fits into the whole layering discussion?
Yeah,
You said it was a sidechain, so...
Yeah, technically it's a sidechain, hangs off the side of Bitcoin, as opposed to, say, Lightning, which is a layer 2, sits on top. I guess one of the interesting definitions about layers is whether you can, is the permissionless fallback to the lower layer. So without permission, can you go from Lightning back to main chain? Yes, that's in the protocol level. Without permission, can you go from Liquid back to main chain? There would be an argument that Liquid is not a layer, it is a sidechain. Personally, I think about Liquid in the same way that I think about Lightning. It's just an alternate layer of Bitcoin. I think we get a little bit too caught up on technical definitions sometimes, but the permissionless, the concept of permissionless fallback to a lower layer is a good one to think about layers. And that takes us to probably Xiaomi and eCash, Fedimints and Cashew, and the same conversation there, which I've had with Pete Wynn. I think you've probably heard that. Pete's wrong on this. Cashew and Fedi are both layer 3s. They have permissionless fallback to layer 2, which is Lightning, who has a permissionless fallback to layer 1. Now, the amounts involved may not make that realistic. If you have 100 sats of eCash, you can fall back to Lightning. Can you fall back to main chain from that? Probably not. But that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, I think from an economic perspective, I would say that maybe a good way to define a layer is like a perfect money substitute. And really, the test is not any specific technical criteria. It's more like, how does the market treat the asset? Does the market treat the asset like indistinguishably from on-chain Bitcoin? If so, then I would say it's a layer. And if it is differentiably, like if it's treated different by the market, then I'd say it doesn't really fit that market. So it fit that definition as a layer of Bitcoin.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. But and then obviously it's like, why would the market treat something the same or differently? And I think that's where the trustless element comes in, and that's where, that's one of the main factors that would cause the market to treat it differently. But even just simple stuff like, I mean, Lightning's got instant settlement, so will the market treat Lightning Bitcoin differently just because it's got different properties that give it better? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean the Bitcoin exchanges that have implemented Lightning integration in the exchange, either for deposits or withdrawal or both, clearly do not differentiate between layer 2 and layer 1. And I'd argue that it's the same for Liquid. So if you look at some exchanges like, say, BTSE, who support Bitcoin, they support Liquid, they support Lightning. If you go to withdraw Bitcoin from BTSE, you can withdraw Bitcoin on main chain or you can withdraw Bitcoin on Liquid. No differentiation. So, if you take the market view of it, those types of things would say they're treated the same, which probably is a nice segue into stablecoins and Tether on Liquid. So, by that definition, USDT, possibly to a lesser extent USDC, are essentially synthetic US dollars. So the market treats those as basically pegged 1-to-1. USDC, with the failure of Silvergate Bank last year, had a big unpegging, very, very ugly. It's a much smaller, heavily regulated and predominantly US-based stablecoin. Tether's the oldest one. It's been around 10 years now, and their backing is US Treasuries now. So that's pretty verifiable, and that's how the market treats it. So interesting definition, useful.
Yeah. I mean, the way to think about Lightning as well is there's that risk element. There is some degree of risk. So while it is trustless, there is funds at risk always.
Yeah. So the risks there are probably twofold. Firstly, because the Lightning node has to be able to sign the transactions, the keys are hot on the Lightning node. So if your Lightning node was hacked, then there may be a way to extract those keys. Now, to my knowledge, that has not been done. But they're still live keys on an internet-connected device. That means they're hot. Therefore, you assume there's a degree of risk there. The other one, to go back to your example, if my node goes down because I've gone off traveling or there's no power to my house, then you can't transact with me. And then if it comes up the next day, all good. Yeah. My node has to say to the Lightning Network, "Hey, I'm back. Don't forget about me. I'm still good. Sorry about that." And your node, which is connected to mine, goes, "Oh, Wiz is back. All good. Okay, happy days. I know I can send payments there." However, if my node goes down and doesn't come back up because I've gone traveling for a month or gone on a complete bender, then your node eventually, usually after about 2 weeks, goes, "Yeah, no, I'm wasting my time here. I'm going to do a forced close on that channel." And then the protocol says, "Well, we're just going to wait a while longer just in case Wiz comes back." And if Wiz doesn't come back, it still gets closed with the appropriate channel states, and that falls back to the main chain. Where we get into hot water, as a lot of the trouble on the Lightning Network happened earlier this year and late last year, was in a very high fee environment. If those closed transactions don't have enough liquidity to pay the fees in a high fee environment, then the transactions get stuck. So now you've got the liquidity locked, but no channel. So very difficult.
Which reminds me, we might move on to one of the later news items, which is that there's been a disclosure of a vulnerability which was affecting old versions of LND. And so this is related to this idea that nodes always need to be online. Yep. So developer Matt Morehouse posted to Delving Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin forum for technical discussion, posted a disclosure of a vulnerability affecting versions of LND before version 17. So the vulnerability would allow a peer to send onion messages, which is how Lightning nodes communicate to each other. So that it allows a node to send a message so large that it could exhaust the memory of some nodes and cause them to crash or be terminated by the node's operating system.
Yeah.
And then for nodes that weren't affected by this, nodes with more memory, even they could be crashed just by sending multiple packets of these messages. And so because Lightning relies on your node being online for the security of funds, this means that the funds in your Lightning channels could potentially be at risk, and so updating is highly recommended. So if you have a Bitcoin Lightning node and you use LND, then definitely highly recommended to upgrade to version 17.
Yeah, and I'd add, no matter what software you're running, make sure it's patched and current, whether it's LND, Core Lightning, LDK, async.
Yeah, well, this is one of the questions I was going to ask you, actually, for your wise sage advice is how do you view the difference between updating Lightning node software versus updating like your Bitcoin Core node software? Because I know some people advocate for, staying a few versions behind, at least for Bitcoin Core. Do you view those differently at all? Do you see them as different risk trade-offs? Or
So Bitcoin Core spends a lot of effort to make sure that it is backwardly compatible. So if there are bug fixes or vulnerabilities patched in a Bitcoin Core release, then generally I'll update, but usually not straight away. I'll run a couple of nodes. One I'll tend to update straight away, and particularly if there's a new toy to play with, whereas the node that I would use for transactions, I'm probably a lot more conservative on. I'll probably stay a couple of versions behind.
Finishing up that news article, there were a couple of interesting things that sort of came out of it. The first one was that it raised some discussion around the proper disclosure process for vulnerabilities in Bitcoin. Some of the Lightning developers, like the team behind Mutiny, expressed a bit of frustration that such a critical vulnerability was not disclosed for about a year. It was about a year from the time the vulnerability was discovered to which it was like publicly disclosed. You got to give time to the developers, but there's also a balance to be made where actual users have real funds at risk, and the longer it goes, the more likely that such a vulnerability becomes known and actually gets exploited in the wild. So
yeah, so maybe
definitely prompted a discussion.
Let's just perhaps unpack what a responsible disclosure is and why it's important. So, So if I'm a software developer and I'm building a product, let's say I'm building a new Bitcoin wallet because there aren't enough Bitcoin wallets, and I build a new wallet and it's out there in the wild, and you're my friend Alex, so you download that and you're using it and you're trying to break it, which is good. That's what I want. I want people to break it. And you find a bug in it. You find a bug in it that actually loses funds permanently, not recoverable. Well, you could jump on Twitter and you could just say, don't use Wiz's wallet. It's a disaster. I just lost 487,000 sats, blah, 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 blah. Or you could go directly to me as the wallet author and go, found a problem. It's a serious problem. Loss of funds. Here's how it occurred. Here's how you can recreate it. And that gives the software developer or team or company the opportunity to fix the problem before it's announced. And the reason that that's important is because if there is a vulnerability, often that vulnerability can be widely exploited. And so you want the patch available before the public disclosure so that you minimize the window that bad actors have to exploit the wider community. But as you said, there is definitely a balancing act, and some people may have seen quite public discussions about and frustrations with major corporations like Apple and others who have a bug bounty program. Bugs are reported and no action is taken, and the bounty is not paid. And then after 6 months or 12 months, the security researcher goes, well, clearly they don't think it's an issue, so I'm going to publish it. and they publish it. And then very quickly, the company involved will, jump up and down and say that's not fair. And then there's a bit of public discourse about, well, here's the vulnerability that was disclosed in, 18th of April back in 2022. Here's the 487 emails where, I prompted you about doing something and you didn't do it because you were on X or Y or Z. Yeah, so there is a balancing act to be struck. 12 months seems very excessive. Where there could be loss of funds, I would have thought 3 to 6 months. I'm not the researcher. I'm not the developer. The patching of those things can be trivial in some cases, and in other cases it can be really complicated. So.
The other interesting thing to come out of this vulnerability disclosure actually was specifically how it was found. And so Matt Morehouse, who's discovered the vulnerability in L&D in this case, but he's been focused on a type of testing known as fuzz testing.
Yep.
And so fuzz testing is basically a way of writing automated tests, so where the computer actually basically does the testing itself, and it randomly injects invalid or malformed or unexpected inputs into the system. So whether it's Lightning or whether it's into main chain Bitcoin, and it's by randomly choosing a whole range of different inputs. But because it's automated, it can obviously iterate through many of them. And it's by doing that it reveals potential defects or vulnerabilities. And so what Matt said, which was quite interesting, I thought, is that once he wrote the automated testing suite, it was actually, it was very quick. It was like, I think he said it was within a matter of like 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes that this bug in L&D was found. So it's quite interesting that it really highlights maybe the potential of this application. I know that in the last year, there's been a pretty heavy emphasis on increasing the scope of fuzz testing within Bitcoin Core and then associated projects as well. So it's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Using computers to test computers or using software to test other software. Yep, absolutely. Yep, lots more of it. Bring it on.
Right, on to our final news item, and that is something we have actually covered briefly previously, but that OceanPool integrated Bolt 12 Lightning payouts. So news from a couple of months ago we mentioned, but for Ocean, using Bolt 12 allows them to prove to the world that a payment was made. They can prove the size of the payment. They can prove the node to which it was paid and that it was paid by the mining pool. So that really supports Ocean's efforts to act as a non-custodial and fully verifiable mining pool. So what is Bolt 12? For those that aren't aware, Bolt 12 is a proposed upgrade for the Lightning Network, which enables reusable payment requests, increased receiver privacy, and increased censorship resistance. One sort of exciting use case that you might expect out of that is automated Lightning withdrawals. So at the moment, to use Lightning sort of requires a unique payment invoice every time you want to make a payment. But Bolt 12 allows you to have a single payment code which you can reuse. And it's kind of like the similar UX outcome as you get for silent payments, but on Lightning. And so that means that an exchange like Hardblock, potentially in the future, we can implement automatic Bitcoin withdrawals on Lightning, and you'd be able to make those withdrawals without having to log in.
Ocean's use of Bolt 12 is a good example of the real power of Bolt 12, which, to use the modern day example, is subscription payments. They're treating it as a subscription payment. So every time a miner reaches 1 million sats or whatever the threshold limit that the miner in the pool has designated, they're going to get a payout, and the payout's going to come by Bolt 12 via Lightning. So with Bolt 11, we had invoices, but invoices are only usable once. But Bolt 11 integrates an on-chain address and a Lightning address. So if the Lightning fails, you can always do an on-chain payment. Bolt 12 extends that further and gives us the ability to do subscriptions. Now, subscriptions become super important as soon as you're starting to run a service which has recurrent value and recurrent payments. So that's something that's been quite difficult to do on Bitcoin, and that potentially brings that capability into what is the fast settlement layer of Bitcoin. So potentially huge economic value. Bolt 12 is live, as you can see from Ocean's use of it. It's live in
Core Lightning, LDK, bolt12.org. You can check out if you're interested in learning more about Bolt 12.
Yep.
Are you going to get your Bolt 12 Lightning tattoo? Have you heard of those?
No, I haven't, Alex.
Okay.
But as long as it's not like Novigratz's lunar tattoo.
No, it's not quite that bad. It's been a bit of a joke that because Bolt 12 finally gives you a reusable payment code rather than having to generate a new invoice every time, it means that you can create a static QR which you can use to receive payments. So there's been sort of a running joke about getting your Bolt 12 tattoo so you can receive Bitcoin payments over Lightning. The joke has obviously been that Bolt 12 until very recently hasn't sort of been finalized, and I believe there's actually still a little bit of work still happening on Bolt 12. So the joke has been don't get your Bolt 12 tattoo too early because things might just change.
Yeah. I don't have any tattoos yet, Alex, and I think Bolt.
Neither, actually.
It's an unlikely candidate.
Such a shame.
Oh no, I'm a constant disappointment.
Yeah. All right, well, we might wrap it up there. That's a little peek into the news of Lightning of the last few months. Thanks very much for joining us, Wiz.
My pleasure.
It's been great. Is there anything you would like to direct people to or link them to before we head off?
Yeah, as you mentioned, the next Bush Bash is up in Palm Cove at the end of the month.
Yep, that's Cairns. Palm Cove is just on the north side of Cairns.
Yep. The one after that will be back in New South Wales.
Well, there's the fork, the WA fork.
Oh, yes. The Western Australian one, which is in September. And then there's the New South Wales one at the start of the summer. For those that are interested in OpenSats, it's opensats.org. If you feel inclined to donate to support open source development, 100% of the donations go to open source development. There is a separate fund that pays for the operations team, which Jack kindly donated a chunk of change to last month. So 20 million went in. I think that was split something like 11 or 12 million into Bitcoin and 7 or 8 into Nostr and $1 million into the operations fund.
Jack, of course, meaning Jack Dorsey for those who.
Correct, Jack Dorsey. Yeah, but he's not the only donor. I mean, there's been other significant donors like Reynolds Foundation and others. Some prefer to remain anonymous, and that's absolutely fine and respected.
Well, let's leave it there, and I'll catch you next fortnight.
Thanks, Alex. Pleasure talking to you.